girl wants to be on Genius so badly. Hello everyone, my name is Lauren Rogers. I'm a singer-songwriter, actress, and huge Fullmetal Alchemist fan. And you might know me for my original songs, Even Into Hell and Shadows, both of which are inspired by the characters of Riza Hawkeye and Roy Mustang. Both of these songs are part of a larger project, which is a full musical adaptation of Fullmetal Alchemist that I have been co-writing with my friend Fiona. I don't plan on posting any more of these songs anytime soon because I think I'd rather try to get some of my music copyrighted and performed in a more official capacity first. But rest assured that it is happening. It is very much underway. We have written over half of the songs on the planned track list, and I really hope I can show some of them to you sometime in the foreseeable future. For now, though, I thought it would be really fun to do a sort of Genius Lyrics style deep dive into the songs I've already posted. I asked you guys a while ago if this was something you'd be interested in seeing, and you guys said yes, and now I actually have time to do it. We're gonna dig into the lyrics, the inspirations behind the songs, the context they take place in the actual story of Fullmetal Alchemist. So without further ado, I'm just gonna play Even Into Hell and provide my commentary along the way. I get hit in the feels just hearing those first few notes because this song is so important to me and it radically shifted the course of my life, which we'll get into later.
You're at my side, and yet I'm so alone, trying to resist the urge.
It's about the angst, it's about the pining.
With the sins for which I can't atone.
That alone atone rhyme is something I've always been really proud of.
You've been my constant all along.
Constant, the use of that word was very important to me because that's sort of paying tribute to another one of my favorite shows, which is Lost, and probably my favorite non-Roy fictional couple, which is Desmond and Penny from that show. If you know, you know. This chord right here is a very important chord because throughout Fullmetal Alchemist, the musical, I've decided to use this chord to represent Roy and Riza's relationship. It wasn't even intentional, it just started showing up at a lot of important moments in the songs I was writing for them. And I just picked up on it and I realized, wait, this is the Roy chord. It's the 6-7 chord in a minor key, by the way. I'll point this chord out to you guys whenever it shows up again because it does throughout both of these songs.
How I've hurt you time and time again, though I want nothing more than to make all your pain disappear.
I talked about this a little bit in my Roy video essay, if you've seen that, but I think there's a lot of guilt tied up in Roy's love for Riza. He has been the indirect cause of, never intentionally, of a lot of her suffering. He convinced her to join the military because of his dreams that she believed in, which resulted in both of them ending up with blood on their hands. He burned the flame alchemy tattoo off her back at her request, so the research could not be used again. You have that line in Beyond the Inferno when she almost has to kill him where he says, "I've done it again, I've hurt you, how foolish can one man be?" I think he blames himself so much for her losing her innocence. A trope that will always get me when I read fan fiction of them is if they're having like a romantic / sexual moment. I think he really wants to, you know, make her feel pleasure instead of pain.
Can't you see that you're supposed to protect me? For you I'd lay down my life.
That sort of speaks for itself. Riza is Roy's bodyguard, but I think Roy sees himself as her protector as much as she sees herself as his. Like in Death of the Undying, when he literally puts their whole mission in jeopardy because he thinks she's in danger. And Riza, you know, starts yelling at him and is like, "It's supposed to be my job." And Roy in his head is just like, "But I love you."
You're the spark that lights my fire, but I swear I'll never let you burn.
Fire metaphor. It's so dramatic. I definitely saw "You're the spark that lights my fire" as the riskiest lyric when I was writing this song. It was the one I was the most concerned about. I'm actually not a huge fan of fire metaphors. I think they can be really cliche and overdone if you don't do something creative with them. The interesting thing about writing songs for Fullmetal Alchemist is that because it's a fantasy show where the characters have all of these like elemental powers, there's so many metaphors that you can use that would sound cliche in any different context, but actually fit perfectly with these characters. You have the fairly standard metaphor of she's the spark that lights his fire, she's his inspiration, she's the thing that keeps him going. But you also have the extra layer to it that sort of flips it on his head of, but I swear I'll never let you burn, which again plays into that idea of he wants to protect her, he wants to make up for having hurt her in the past.
I'll stay alive, 'cause leaving you's the worst thing I could do. For even into hell, I'd follow you. Each day I try to want to stay alive. You gave me strength to see myself with hope instead of hate.
I don't want to go so far as to say Riza's actively suicidal, because, like, her sense of self-preservation is definitely better than Roy's, but I do think she struggles greatly to value herself as an individual, and I think she sees Roy not only as someone she loves, but she sees helping him achieve his goals as her one shot at atonement, and if she loses him, she completely loses that, and her life loses its value. I definitely think that Roy and how much he values and respects and needs her has helped her to value her own life a bit more, as you can see in the scene from the show when Roy chastises her for giving up on living after she thinks he's dead, and he says, "You've got to stay strong, don't you ever give up on living."
We'll never see the day when we can leave this all behind. Your hand in mine, oh, I'd gladly surrender myself to you.
I definitely think that of the two, Roy, with how much of an idealist he is and how determined he is to go for what he wants in life, is the one more likely to sort of indulge in that hope for a future with Riza. I think that is something he very much dreams of and that keeps him going. Whereas with Riza, I think she is definitely more the one to push her feelings aside and resign herself to, no, this can never be. But I absolutely think she feels that longing too and struggles not to give in to her feelings for him, which you can definitely hear in her delivery right here.
Our lives are bound by more than duty's call.
I just love that line because it's so simple, but it's such a good summation of their relationship. It's like, yes, duty binds them together, but it's more than that. It's more than that.
I will protect
We get a
you
lot of
myself
foreshadowing right here.
all that I have left to hold on to.
And if I stand too close to fire, not my 16-year-old belt. So there you have yet another layer to that fire metaphor with, and if I stand too close to fire, I've always known I might get burned. But while Roy is a deeply good and noble person, I think, he's also very dangerous, and I think there is absolutely something inside him that is truly monstrous. He can be incredibly vicious and brutal when pushed to that point. Not to Riza, mind you, this isn't me saying he's abusive, but Riza, of course, knows that if Roy were ever to go too far, she will have to follow through on her promise to shoot him, which would almost certainly break her. This is something I love doing in my songwriting, is have a kind of contrasting, evolving chorus. The second one brings a different perspective or idea than the first one did. So you have that with "You're the spark that lights my fire" versus "And if I stand too close to fire."
And if you ever leave me, then you know I'm coming too. For even into hell, I follow you.
That ends up being really dark if you consider how little value Riza often places on her own life. And if you ever leave me, then you know I'm coming too. Of course, like, you think about the scene where she thinks he's dead and almost lets herself get killed by lust. If you ever leave me, I'm coming too.
I give you a home, I give you the world, I give you the things we know deep down we don't deserve.
That is my favorite lyric in the song. And it's actually, I think it was the one I came up with first. I came up with the bridge of this song first. I'm a very Swiftian songwriter in that way. I almost always come up with my bridges first.
To you I gave my back, my trust, 2 pairs of killer's eyes between us, my secret weapon and my better half.
I remember being so proud of like the sudden shift in rhythm right there, where it goes from being very straight da 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 to da 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 da. So of course the lyric "To you I gave my back and my trust" has different meanings for both of them. Roy has charged Riza with watching his back / the power to shoot him in the back if necessary. And then of course Riza trusted Roy with the flame alchemy research, which is tattooed on her back. Two pairs of killer's eyes between us, of course, is referencing in the Ishvalan War of Extermination episode when Roy sees Riza on the battlefield and he says she has the eyes of a killer too. And I just remembered my secret weapon and my better half is actually technically the first lyric I ever came up with for this song. Long before I actually started writing it, I just had that lyric, my secret weapon and my better half, in my head because it's such a fitting image for them. It's so like badass and also so sweet.
All by myself, yet I am not alone.
That's another thing I love doing is like contrasting ideas from like the first verse to the third verse, because the song starts with "You're at my side and yet I'm so alone," and then Roy has like reflected more on his feelings, and by the end he decides, all by myself, yet I am not alone, because he'll never be alone as long as he has Riza.
I know I can count on you to keep me in my path towards a place where I can be with you.
This is another one of my favorite lyrics in the song because it has a double meaning. Towards a place where I can be with you. There's a theory that like once Roy becomes Führer, he'll finally be able to ask Riza to marry him. But you also have the darker meaning. Perhaps Roy feels like he can't let himself be with Riza until they've both fully atoned for the lives they took, in which case that wouldn't be until their death. The place that I can be with you could also mean heaven. Oh, you're carved into my soul. That's a good one. Now, if you are a diehard Roy shipper, such as myself, I'm sure that you have seen a certain video essay which explains the symbolism of Roy's Gate of Truth, which contains many symbols that symbolize his relationship with Riza, such as the Red King and White Queen, which of course, since the Gate of Truth represents Roy's soul, that means that Riza is essentially carved into his soul. This line was also definitely inspired by a certain fanfic called Delicate, which, if you know, you know, literally changed my life. But there's a line near the end of my favorite chapter in Delicate, chapter 18, where Roy says, "I love you so much that you're engraved in my soul." And when I read that, I was like, oh, I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that. We love a good final chorus counterpoint. I think I remember when I came up with this part, I like fully lost my mind and ran around my room. I was so excited.
I find my redemption. I'll wait as long as it takes till our peace has been earned.
But in you, I find my redemption. You could really say that that's like the thesis statement of Even Into Hell. In spite of how much suffering they've caused each other, in spite of all of the darkness and pain in their relationship, their lives are ultimately better with each other in them. And till our peace has been earned, which of course, whether by Roy becoming Führer or simply by both of them somehow getting to go to heaven.
Stay strong for me. Don't lose yourself.
Alluding to the central points of tension. Stay strong for me, value your own life, don't give up on living, and then Riza saying don't lose yourself, don't give in to like your lowest instincts and your anger. I always knew how this song was gonna end, the harmonies, the notes, everything. And then you have this very haunting D minor scale right here. So Even Into Hell, like I previously mentioned, is a very important song to me. It's my favorite and I think the best written song I've ever written, because I think every lyric has purpose and thought behind it. Every lyric says something new and meaningful about their relationship. Even Into Hell was not the first song I had ever written, but it was the first song that I thought was good enough that I wanted to share it with the world. It's a very fun story how I was inspired to write Even Into Hell, because my best friend Gracie had sent me Sun Eater by Leanna Firestone, which is about Mirio and Tamaki from My Hero Academia. I thought the lyrics of that song portrayed their relationship in such a sweet and clever and thoughtful way. I had virtually no confidence in my songwriting ability at that point. I had come up with the idea for Fullmetal Alchemist the musical about a year ago. I planned a track list. The idea for Even Into Hell and a couple of lines and ideas for it were in my head. I didn't think it was going to be a thing, like, at all. But I don't know, something about that song made me think that I could write something just like it for Roy and Riza. And so I decided to try, and I just stood there for a few minutes, and then the bridge popped into my head. I went to my room and I came up with Roy's verse, and then I came up with the rest of it over the next 2 nights. And then I put it on YouTube, which is how I met my co-writer, and the rest is history! Now, when I came up with Even Into Hell, I knew that I wanted it to be part of this larger musical project, but since it was such an on the whim, in the moment thing, I really just wanted to like let myself write whatever came into my head and not really have any constraints in mind. It took me quite a while to figure out what context in the story of Fullmetal Alchemist I wanted to place Even Into Hell in, and what changes I would have to make to the song as a result. And after much angsting and banging my head against the wall, I finally came up with the answer one day in the shower, which is where I do all my best work. And if it's possible, it made the song even more heartbreaking than it already is. Even Into Hell takes place after Führer Bradley has split up Roy's unit and assigned Riza to be his assistant instead of Roy's. So it becomes this sort of distant duet, this imagined inner dialogue of their feelings for each other. It's them coming to terms with how much they mean to each other now that they've been forced apart, and pledging their continued devotion and loyalty in spite of any forces that stand in their way. Now, as I mentioned previously, I knew that I was going to have to make some changes to Even Into Hell if I wanted it to work in the context of a narrative. The main reason for this being that Roy and Riza's relationship is very often praised for its subtlety, for the fact that you know how much they love each other, but they never outright say it. And Even Into Hell, as it is portrayed on my YouTube channel, is very explicitly a love song. And this unfortunately meant that I had to replace my very favorite lyric in this piece, which is, of course, I'd give you a home, I'd give you the world, I'd give you the things we know deep down we don't deserve, because it's just too explicitly romantic for this early in the show. Even Into Hell takes place around halfway through the musical. So my co-writer and I angsted over a potential replacement, and she finally came up with this. Thank you, Fiona.
For everyone else is the one thing we can't hope to have for ourselves.
Among other changes made to the musical version of Even Into Hell are Roy's first verse being in a lower key, A minor, which is more comfortable for a baritone.
You're at my side, and yet I'm so trying to resist.
Really pushing the limits of my range here. There's more harmonies in the final chorus, and we've changed it a bit to be more suitable to Roy's range once again.
And if I stand too close to fire, then I know I might get under. And in you, I find my redemption. I'll wait as long as it takes to learn.
So it feels more like a duet. Roy's very explicitly romantic third verse has been cut entirely and replaced with the "They've even taken my queen" monologue from the 520 Cents Promise.
My pawn, my rook, my knight, my bishop, and worst of all, you've even taken my queen.
I mourn the loss of "You're carved into my soul" on the daily, but it's fine. And perhaps the most notable and poignant change to this song, and one I've had in mind since I came up with it in the first place, is this.
I hope you know I'll always.
They stop themselves right before they say, "I love you." So you get this moment in this staging I've imagined in my head where they're just inches away from each other and boring into each other's eyes, and then you can like cut the tension with a knife, and then Riza turns away because she knows it can never be. So as you can tell, Even Into Hell has evolved a lot since I first wrote it, including how I imagine the instrumentation. When I first came up with it, I imagined it in my head as this very raw acoustic guitar strummy piece, but of course I can't actually play guitar, so then I had to record the demo on the piano, which of course very much impacted how I imagined the overall arrangement going. And as I've developed as a songwriter and learned how to do fuller instrumentations, it's developed into this very full and lush, but still very intimate orchestral rock song. The final full arrangement of Even Into Hell includes oboe, drum set, violins, cellos, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, bass guitar, and piano. So this is how the second chorus would sound with all that. Even Into Hell was the first song I wrote for Fullmetal Alchemist the musical, and it's very interesting to think about now because its sound is rather different from the rest of the songs in the show. The overall sound of the rest of Fullmetal Alchemist the musical is a lot more musical theater, like something you would think by Ahrens and Flaherty or Frank Wildhorn. Even Into Hell definitely still has a musical theater storytelling sensibility with the characters singing their internal feelings to the audience, and you have that conflict between Roy wanting so badly to express his feelings for Riza versus Riza still feeling like she has to repress them. But structurally and instrumentally, Even Into Hell is very much a pop rock song. It has that like all too well factor of being something that's very intimate and poignant, but also can be screamed by thousands of fans at a concert. At least in theory, if I actually got to hear this song performed at a concert, I think I would die. I have a document that has a list of all of the songs in this musical and the songs from other musicals and various other works that I think inspired them. And when I was thinking of what inspired Even Into Hell, almost no musical theater love duets came to mind that were similar to me. I think Even Into Hell does have a lot of structural parallels with Rewrite the Stars from The Greatest Showman because they both feature the first verse sung by the man, the second verse sung by the woman, and then they both come together for the bridge and chorus, and that chorus evolves as the song goes on. And of course, lyrically, it's very much a Roy I song because you have similar themes of repressed feelings and forbidden love. I also can see lots of similarities to As Long As You're Mine from Wicked because they're both very minor key and dramatic and have lots of similarities with the instrumentation, and they both have that factor of like sexual tension and doomed romance. Purely in terms of sound, I actually think that the biggest inspiration for Even Into Hell was Haunted by Taylor Swift. This song in general has had such a huge impact on my songwriting because I heard it when I was very little, and it was one of the first songs I'd ever heard that was very dramatic and very minor key and had this fusion of like rock band with like orchestral strings, and it just totally altered my brain chemistry, and it had such a huge influence on my songwriting. Inspirations for Even Into Hell, both in terms of sound and lyrics, were Set Fire to the Rain by Adele, The Resistance by Muse, Grace by Jeff Buckley, and a lot of songs by Evanescence, like just their general sound. So that was my breakdown of Even Into Hell, the haunting, smoldering, almost love duet that truly changed my life and kickstarted my passion for songwriting. So now let's talk about Shadows. Shadows is a very interesting song to think about in hindsight because it actually wasn't even on the original planned track list for Fullmetal Alchemist the musical. Yup, you heard me correctly. I, the internet's biggest Riza Hawkeye fan, was originally not planning on giving her a solo. Riza is such a reserved character and not at all the type of person to take the spotlight for herself. So I was having a really hard time finding an obvious park and bark moment for her. But then one day the summer before last, I was like, what if we did give Riza a solo though? The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the most obvious, sensible decision in the world. I had read Delicate fairly recently when I had this idea, and that was what truly opened my eyes to just the sheer tempest within Riza of emotions and insecurities and longings that I feel like you really only get to see hinted at in the show. We're always told that the best adaptations are the ones that add new depths that you can't necessarily get from the source material, and I was determined that my contribution to Fullmetal Alchemist was going to be giving Riza Hawkeye her moment to shine, and that's how Shadows was born. this is actually a reworking of A Soldier's Honor, which is one of my favorite pieces from the Fullmetal Alchemist score. You'll probably recognize it as the piece that plays during that scene in Beyond the Inferno. A variant of this theme also plays during Riza's breakdown in Death of the Undying, which sort of leads me to perceive this as Riza's theme, which is why I incorporated it here. So, Shadows takes place directly after Riza's confrontation with Pride. It's in the scene when she comes back to her apartment, which you can see in the thumbnail. So those hands of darkness are obviously referring to Pride's little shadow hand thingies, though it could also be referring to depression, which Riza definitely has.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Fiona actually helped me come up with a lot of these beginning lyrics, and then I sort of molded them into the actual song. If I remember correctly, the first verse of the song I actually wrote last. I definitely came up with the bridge of this song first. I kind of write a lot of my songs backwards, if you can't tell. Another thing is that initial melody, that actually ended up becoming the motif that represents the homunculi throughout the course of the musical. I knew the homunculi were going to have their own theme when I started writing this, but it took me ages to come up with it until I realized that it was right in front of me and I'd already written it, because she's singing about pride in this scene, and I could easily imagine that theme in like a more bombastic context. It's very versatile, and so it works perfectly as a theme to represent the homunculi in general. This, of course, is referring to Riza's father tattooing the flame alchemy research on her back. Loneliness, I very much think, is something that has followed Riza her entire life. She lost her mother at a very young age, and her father is highly implied to have been obsessive about alchemy to the point of neglecting her. She's forbidden from being in a relationship with the man she loves, and she's essentially had her entire support system stripped away from her. This is perhaps the loneliest we see her in the entire show, and so that loneliness and very likely touch-starvedness is something I wanted to highlight in this song.
Trying to be perfect like the alchemy my father cherished so.
So something I really wanted to highlight about Riza throughout this musical is that I think she is incredibly hard on herself and cripplingly perfectionistic, both due to the atrocious things she's done and due to growing up with a neglectful parent. This is a trait that's really heavily emphasized in Delicate, that Riza almost feels as though she has this need to earn her right to exist. I would imagine that at Riza's core, her deepest, most selfish desire is simply to be told that she is good enough.
I've made that mistake before, but I won't let myself open that door, because if I do, someone gets hurt.
This is the one lyric that we've actually changed since posting this song. It's been changed to "I lock it away so no one gets hurt." And that was actually Fiona's idea. Thanks again, Fiona, best co-writer. So then you get the parallel with "open that door, lock it away." It's not that the original lyric was bad, it's just that every time I had to sing the lyric "someone gets hurt," it made me think of Mean Girls, and I don't want that because I hate Mean Girls.
Made the bed in which you must lie from the moment you took his idealistic hand, so tempted by the thought of being something, helping someone, so afraid of being imperfect, so afraid of breaking your pride, that because of your perfection, hundreds died.
This is where Riza really starts to turn her anger in on herself at her naivete for following Roy and her greatest fear, which is that her own insecurities are what led to her taking hundreds of lives. Riza's neglectful upbringing, I think, led her with a desire to prove herself, with a need to be good at something. Unfortunately, what she happened to be good at was being a sniper. This is very much alluding to the scene in the show when Kimberly tells Riza that there must be some part of her that allows herself to feel a hint of pride and satisfaction after she's made a successful kill. And she can't bring herself to say no because that perfectionistic part of her does feel that satisfaction, and because of that, she is disgusted with herself. I would have to say that so afraid of being imperfect, so afraid of breaking your pride, that because of your perfection, hundreds died, is probably my favorite lyric in this song and one of the biggest gut punches in this entire musical for me. Like, I'm not joking. I remember honestly being shocked with myself when I wrote it. You also have the extra layer of the word choice of so afraid of breaking your pride because she's just had the confrontation with pride, and pride is the sin that she struggles the most with. Couple of other little details. I love that the word died is emphasized with a low note because I think so often we think in musical theater we have to use really high notes to emphasize particularly emotional moments when low notes can be just as effective. And I didn't even do this on purpose, but the notes of "you made the bed in which you must lie" are the exact same notes as "Even into Hell" when it says "I'd give you a home, I'd give you the world." I've connected the two dots.
So how could you ever have something as selfish as peace? You tied your own bonds, yet you dare to hope for release. Will I ever reach my destination and let it go?
And then right there, you have that chord again. How could you ever have something as selfish as peace? Will I ever let in the light? Riza knows that she has condemned herself to a life without love, but she cannot help but long for it nonetheless. And I think that's what makes that major 6-7 chord work so beautifully for Roy and Riza, is because it is so full of hope, but also this quality of hopelessness. It is knowing that you cannot have something, but yearning for it so desperately anyway. And I think that is what makes Roy and Riza's relationship so tragic and so beautiful. And we shift to the relative major key here because she's thinking of Roy and her team, who are perhaps her only sources of comfort and happiness.
Can I go on without my soul?
It's very simple, very vulnerable.
Feeling my way over the long road, away from those who helped me see to the end of the tunnel.
He's the spark that lights her fire too.
Carry the dead through the river, blood to their resting.
That's almost directly quoting episode 30.
You will fight so that others don't have to, though part of you dies with each bullet you fire.
That line is very much a reminder that I think it's important to remember that Riza does in fact kind of hate being in the military. Not even kind of, like it's an institution she deeply loathes. But she pulls that trigger because someone has to get their hands dirty, even though each time she does, part of her dies.
Keep moving, whether you think you deserve it or not.
If but in you I find my redemption is the thesis statement for Even into Hell, you'll keep living whether you think you deserve it or not is the thesis statement for Shadows.
After all you've made your home in the shadows.
So you very much end with that recurring theme of Riza has resigned herself to her fate. She has accepted her loneliness. She does not feel that happiness is ever in the cards for her, and she believes that that is what she deserves. So what if she's had her guiding light taken away from her? The darkness is where she belonged as a little girl, and it's where she belongs now. I'm gonna be honest, I've kind of just had to sit here for the past like 3 or so minutes because I couldn't think of what to say next. This song is like so quietly devastating that it sort of just robs you of your ability to say anything else. For Shadows, I took inspiration from a lot of the quieter and more intimate female solos in musical theater. I never wanted this to be like a big belty moment. Riza has those in other places in the show, but for this song, I really wanted to emphasize her loneliness and quiet strength. Some of the earliest songs I can think of inspiring Shadows were Dangerous to Dream from Frozen, Flowers from Hadestown, The Hill from Once, and Sonia Alone from Natasha Pierre in The Great Comet of 1812. They all carry these themes of inner strength, loyalty, lost innocence, yearning for connections you can't have. I would also cite Breathe from In the Heights and Your Daddy's Son from Ragtime, even though they're both a bit bigger and beltier than Shadows. They both have these very fragile, almost lullaby-like beginnings that eventually give way to this accelerated, gut-wrenching bridge. Plus, Breathe also has the perfectionism angle, which I think Riza could definitely connect with. It's also kind of giving Lifeboat from Heathers, I think. Shadows is definitely one of the smaller and more intimate orchestrations in Fullmetal Alchemist the musical. It features an oboe, violins, cello, guitar, and piano. I actually have a different instrument for every character in this musical, and oboe is Riza's, cello is Roy's. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this way longer than I expected deep dive into these two songs that have become so dear to my heart. I really hope that I get to do other videos like this and show you guys even more of my original music in the future. You guys also left some of the sweetest comments I have ever gotten on my most recent video about college. Thank you so much to everybody who said that they were proud of me or that my video helped them with their experience in some way. I'm so grateful. Toodles!